in the red Chumashim, we're going to look at two texts today. Page 1024, exactly. So let's talk for a moment about the historical aspect of Deuteronomy. When was Deuteronomy written, roughly?
600 BC.
Yeah, so sometime between 700 and 600 BCE, roughly, is when we attribute it to, under the reign of Hezekiah and Josiah and people like that. What's going on historically speaking in terms of the political landscape of Israel?
I don't know if it's political exactly, but there's people are moving away from the faith.
People are moving away from the faith, right? What else?
In the north.
Well, in the north, yes. In particular, why? What's happened in the north?
Assyrian conquest.
That's right. The Assyrian conquest happens in 722 BCE. And afterward, in 701, that's when the Assyrians kind of make their way down into the Jerusalem area. Hezekiah hides them in the tunnels. They narrowly escape. Everything is good. And then under the reign of Josiah, they have this reconnection to the faith. But one of the themes that we have over and over and over again, in Deuteronomy in particular, is the prohibition against idolatrous practice. Why?
Probably because they were doing it.
Yeah, that's one reason, for sure. Why else?
Well, I think they just want to build a cohesive group that is different from everybody else. So they don't really care about all these other gods. They just want their group to be in their own ghetto. And so they figure, okay, let's just say there's one God, and that way we're going to be opposed to everybody else that doesn't believe this, and then we have our own cohesive community.
Great, so I think that you're right. I think that there is an element of cohesion. There's a desire to be different from and apart from everyone else. Even the idea of sanctity, of kadosh. We call it holy, but it really means to separate. Lekadesh means to separate oneself from the other.
And circumcision is about as far away as you can get from anybody else, so they figure, hey, let's do this.
Right.
Well,
So
the Egyptians circumcised.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Then I'm wrong.
apparently Jews also circumcise bears, but that's another story.
That was attempted once.
I didn't say that the circumcision failed. I just said that, you know.
There's another possible explanation of it, though, one that I find more compelling, which is, you know, we've retroactively changed history. Like Judea was like this great province, but
Right.
Judea was the complete backwater of the Levant.
Right.
It was desert. There's very little water. The land isn't that arable, and the reason it survived, it was sitting in the shadow of Egypt. You know, and Syria almost got to it, but, you know, being next to Egypt protected it. And when everything was kind of taken away, they finally had the power to control how they did things. And this was their theology.
Right.
And their theology wasn't around power. The North had a theology around power. They made all the deals with Assyria, and you know, they had 2 million troops that, you know, and they were helping in the wars. And how did that work out?
Right.
So, you know, I think there was a bitterness towards, yeah, I know there's a religious aspect in the Torah, but I think there was also a political aspect to it, which is, you know, what good does it do you to parlay with foreign nations and their gods?
Right. Right. I think that's all true, especially because if there were all of these other gods that we were worshiping, especially in the time of Assyria, and they didn't get us anywhere. If anything, they got us further away from that sense of cohesion, or further away from our sense of worship in Jerusalem, then what good are they?
And that God did not defend the northern
That's
kingdom.
right, God didn't defend them. So we have these several really interesting new ideas that come out of the book of Deuteronomy that we've never seen before. So take a look for a second on 1024 in the Red Chumash. So the first thing that we have that is interesting to note is this declaratory statement, this declaration that is made about God. And we all know it as the Shema. We say it all the time. We say it twice a day. We say it several times in addition on Shabbat or on the holiday. We say it in the Kedusha. We say it when we take out the Torah. There is a perpetual reminder of God's oneness. But let's look at what we have embedded in this statement. So Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. We've got 6 words. What's the first word?
Sure.
What does it mean?
Yeah.
Wake up.
Listen,
Oh, wake up's nice. I hadn't thought about it that way. Listen,
listen.
wake up, hear. Anyone know what form it's in? Biblical Hebrew form?
It's an imperative.
It's an imperative. It's a command form,
Right.
if you will, right? So it's not something that it'd be great if you did. You're supposed to do it. And what are you supposed to listen to, and who's supposed to listen?
All of Israel.
All of Israel. So listen, Israel, and what are they supposed to listen to?
There's one.
Adonai. We actually have 3 references here to God's name. We have Adonai, Eloheinu, and Adonai. Not 1, not 2, but 3. So let's look at each one.
3.5 in Israel.
Yes, you could make an argument that the word Yisrael is invoking something that perhaps is from an Elohist tradition. But in particular, let's look at the names of the Tetragrammaton. Why do we need it 3 times? What does Eloheinu mean?
Our
It
God.
means our God. And typically when you hear Eloheinu, what is it a reference to?
I don't know.
Could be. But there's an additional reference. I'll give you a hint. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu Belohei Avoteinu Elohei Abraham Elohei Yitzchak Elohei Yaakov.
Okay. So the God of God.
It is almost always in reference to
a person.
the patriarchs.
Okay.
It is a linkage, if you will, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It is not our God, it is the God of all Israel, the God that is connected to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So there's a historical component to it as well that Deuteronomy picks up on that you might not think would be there because Deuteronomy is perhaps written in a different era. Yet, it connects us back to Genesis. All right? But we don't just get, listen, Israel, the Lord is our God. We get this additional thing that is Adonai Echad. The Lord is one. What does that mean?
One or alone.
Oh, I'm glad that you brought that up. So
What'd you
what
say,
does the
Jerry?
word Echad, he said one or alone?
Oh,
So it means the
It
only.
says-
It means the only God.
That's right, so it could be the only God. What does the word Echad literally mean? One. It's the number. Okay, so it could mean the number, it could mean alone. What's the difference in those interpretations? Is there a difference?
well, alone, one. Yeah, I guess it's about the same.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you have oh, you don't have your altar with you. What does Friedman say? So Friedman says, listen, Israel, Yahweh is our God, Yahweh is one. Okay?
I mean, one meaning to that is that he's not it's not a monolatist God. It's not saying Yahweh is the only God. It's just saying he's one. There's a difference.
Well, what does that mean? That that Adonai is one.
That he's not a part of the pantheon.
Okay, that could be one meaning. What's
Yeah,
another?
but if you use alone, that would imply monotheism.
Yes, so what you have here is a tension in the translation of Echad. Is it one God, or is it God alone, or is it God that is connected to a world where there are other gods and we are separating this God from them? Right, that's a monotheistic versus monolatrous tension.
Is there another
This is
Hebrew
the
word
God
for
that
alone?
is.
Levad, maybe, but it's not really a biblical Hebrew word. I mean, maybe it appears, but it's not one
Because
that's...
if not, maybe that's why they use they have the word echad because there was no other word we could use for alone.
Well, if we wanted to make the argument that it means no other, or
So
one,
that's the ancient E, right?
That's right.
So that's what we mean, no second. There's no
that's right,
second.
there's no other. Where does that come from?
Also in the. I forget now. It is in the literature.
It's in the literature,
It's in the
it's an
literature.
Adon Olam, right,
It's
okay.
an Adon Olam.
Echad ve'ein sheni, right? Okay, so there's one and there is no other. That's a theological statement to say that there is no other God. However, historically speaking, we may be wanting to say, no, we're separating this God alone from everybody else. So it's possibly. Now, why would it
This is the
matter?
God, but all the other gods are actually. You're basically coming to this God.
Okay, so let's talk about it historically. What? Go ahead. Did you get it?
No, I see where you're leading us.
Go ahead.
It's one with us.
Okay, what does that mean?
Oh, wow, that's how to explain that. That
How do I ask
he
you?
is us and we are he. That we dwell together. That his life is our life. That his goal is our goal. That his aim is our aim.
Okay, so now you're translating it actually as not as echad meaning one, or
There's a
echad
verb-
meaning alone, but you're actually bringing in the idea of unity.
Well, there's a verb missing after one.
There's actually a verb
Like one
you
of
could argue
us.
that's missing
Right.
in the whole thing.
Right.
The only verb in this entire sentence is what? Listen. What am I listening to? It's weird that the command to have one God has with it the verb listen.
Well, is it listen or hear? There's a big difference. It should be hear.
Friedman translates as listen, this translates it as hear.
Now, this says listen to.
Shmoa means to hear, but it could also mean to listen. If you're actually talking about the difference between hearing and understanding,
Yes.
then there's a different word for understanding. Not this one.
Who's supposed to be saying this?
It's a great question.
Yes.
Let's go back just a few verses.
Well, there's a typo in the book. You notice in Friedman,
Typo?
verse 4 has a double quote beginning
Yeah.
verse 4. There's no end quote that I could find. And there's no single quote. There's no quote in.
Verse 4.
Yeah, so paragraph begins with a... What page?
Oh wait, no, I think
Because
the
it's
whole
a
thing is a quote.
continuation.
The whole thing is a
The whole thing
continuous
is
quote.
continuation.
If you look at each paragraph, just about on every page, there's a
Oh,
quote at the
It's a
beginning.
continued quote.
I forgot
So
about
it is
that.
Okay,
It's a
because
continued
remember,
quote.
what's the purpose of who's speaking in Deuteronomy?
Moses.
Right. In theory, this is one long monologue from Moses.
So every paragraph's got a double quote.
Okay, so go back to the beginning of chapter 6 for a second. I'm going to assume for a moment that Moses is the person who is speaking here. Remember, we've just come off of the second rendition of the Decalogue. That was just a few verses before. And Moses recounting once again what happened at Mount Sinai, or what she calls Har Chorev, the Mount of Chorev. But look at the beginning of chapter 6. Alvin, you want to read? Please.
And this is the instruction, the laws and the rules that the Lord your God has commanded me to impart to you, to be observed in the land that you are about to cross into and occupy, so that you, your children, and your children's children may revere the Lord your God and follow, as long as you live, all his laws and commandments that I enjoin upon you to the end that you may long endure. Obey. No, he was the same kind of similar construction. Obey, O Israel, willingly and faithfully, that it may go well with you, and that you may increase greatly in a land flowing with milk and honey, as the Lord, the God of your fathers, spoke to you.
Now read the sentence.
Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is the Lord alone.
So who is speaking this verse?
It must be Moses.
It's Moses speaking the verse. So what does that tell you now about Moses' message to the people? This is not an introduction to, we'll call it either monotheism or monolatry from God. It's Moses who's teaching this to the people, saying, Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord alone. What's Moses doing?
He's telling them not to worship any idols.
Okay, so I think you're right. Moses is telling them, be very careful not to worship any other idols. If it was written in the 7th century, roughly, or thereabouts, whoever wrote it, Josiah or somebody else, Jeremiah, I don't know who it was, wrote it, what is it that they're speaking to? What are they responding to?
All the dissension going on.
Could be.
They just want to keep everybody together.
Yep. And all of the other idolatrous practice that has gotten them to this point, which they believe is perhaps the reason why all of the bad stuff has happened to them.
More specifically, though, the northern kingdom was just
That's
destroyed.
exactly right.
They're
Who's the
flooding
northern kingdom god?
Yeah.
El.
Yeah.
But who's the god of Assyria?
Baal,
Ashur.
Ashur.
Okay? So in some ways, this may be a polemic against the other gods that are in competing tension to Adonai, and they believe is the reason why the northern kingdom has fallen.
But I think as you were beginning to allude to, you have, after the destruction of the northern kingdom, you have people coming to the south. Jews, I don't know what to call them, but
Mushites.
Mushites, coming to, and we need to establish now a unity for religious practice for this mixture of Jews.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And to take what you said one step further, Moses doesn't end with this proclamation of faith. Look what he says, verse 5. We all know this paragraph, we've heard it dozens of times, hundreds of thousands of times probably in our lives. All right? Alvin, will you read?
Starting with
Verse 5.
You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your might. Take to heart these instructions with which I charge you this day. Impress them upon your children. Recite them when you stay at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign upon your hand and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates.
What is this?
The commandment for the morning prayer.
Well, there's lots of commandments that are in it.
There's a lot
It's
in
going
there.
to be, put in lots of reminders that God is one.
Yeah, that's
Put
true.
all reminders around where you're moving around, something.
That's
close to
true.
your
So
house,
you
something-
always can see and
you always
remember
remember
and exactly.
Something's there that
Irrespective of where you are,
where you are, there should be reminders.
it doesn't matter that you're in the south or in the north or in Europe or in Asia. It's the same.
If you can see Russia from your doorstep, then not see Russia. Right? Okay.
But the point being that this is not a religion localized. It's a religion that extends beyond boundaries.
I agree with all of what you said, but I think there's one very important thing that you have. Don't be too quick to overlook.
Can I try?
Yeah.
It's a new formulation, right?
Say it again. Say it.
So in the Elohist formulation, you throw the Virgin in the volcano, and then he rains his beneficence upon you. But in this formulation, it's, it's through your actions and your observances that you're faithful to me. And in order to keep you on that road, you have to keep me at the foremost in your mind.
That's true, but I think there's one other piece. We've not seen this anywhere else before. There's a new idea that's introduced with regard to our connection to Adonai.
About loving him?
Love. It's not only a commanding relationship. It's not only an authoritarian relationship. It's not only a, you got to do this, 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 and this. It's not, authoritarian in the way you might think of a relationship with God. But we've introduced a new emotion in our relationship with God. That of love. By the way, the book of Deuteronomy is going to go back and forth in a way between this idea of ahava and yir'ah. Yir'ah can be translated as fear, or it can be translated as awe. So I'll give you
Are you talking about verse 2 here?
verse 2 where?
So that you'll fear Yahweh, your God?
Which chapter are you in?
Right where you are.
6?
No,
Yes, I am.
So that you will fear Yahweh. your God.
Yes. So I'm going to use... What does that say?
Noraim?
Yeah, the Yamim Noraim.
All right. Days of awe.
What are the days of awe?
These are the days of awe.
These are the days of awe. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur.
Is the days of awe.
But Norah can also mean fear. It can also mean awe. So what are the Yamim Noraim about?
Being in awe.
Could be being in awe. It could also be being in fear. Why is Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah connected with fear?
Being written
Judgment? Right?
Yeah, if you
Being
continue
written in
further to verse 15,
Yep.
basically it's threatening him to say, if you don't love the Lord your God, and you don't follow his commandments,
Yeah.
he's going to wipe you off the face of the earth.
Yes.
That's a major threat.
Yes. So there's this very interesting layered approach to our relationship with Adonai.
How do you love something if you're threatened with death if you don't?
Right? Right?
That's what the black community is asking themselves all
I
the
mean,
time.
Threatening a threat of death is not gonna make you love someone.
Can make you what?
Can't make you love somebody.
Well, ask an
being
abused
threatened with
child
death.
or an abused wife.
I mean, you
They
can fake the
continue.
love, but you
No.
can't have genuine love.
But that's not true, because abused children and abused wives still love their abusers.
But this
Yeah,
is
but they're
about
not being
blessing.
they're not being told, if you don't love me, I'm going to kill you.
No, but you love them anyway, even though they may kill you.
Yeah, but I wonder though, the love oftentimes with abuse is out of fear.
No, it's not.
Sometimes.
No, it's not.
Okay, I know not across the board.
Isn't this really about blessings and curses, though?
Well, that's like the hostage concept, where you come to identify with your...
Swedish
The
syndrome.
Stockholm syndrome.
So turn for a second to chapter. Chapter 11, verse 13, 1052. Okay, verse 13 through verse 21 is the second paragraph of the Shema. This is the one that we say quietly. And there are similar tropes to what we had in the first paragraph of the Shema. Right? It starts out, "V'haya im shamoa tishmu el mitzotai." If you surely listen. Right? They translate it as obey, but it's the same word Shema. To the commandments that I enjoin upon you today. And then it says, "Le'ahava et Adonai Elohechem u'le'ovdo b'chol lebavchem u'b'chol nafshechem." Loving the Lord your God and serving God with all of your heart and soul. Again, similar tropes that we've just had. But then we get into what Jerry was talking about. What feels like this sense of threat. I will grant rain for your land in the season, the early rain and the late. You shall gather your new grain and your wine and your oil. I'll provide grass in the fields, and you shall eat your field. Take care not to be lured away.
That's a
and
bribe.
serve
That
other
starts
gods.
with a bribe.
part is
That
the
falls
bribe.
with a threat.
Right. It starts well,
Starts with the bribe. and then
or it starts with a reward,
Yeah, starts
if
with
you
the
want to
reward.
say it that way.
Sounds more like a bribe.
Okay.
It sounds
Well-
like the parents I grew up with.
So I think that there is these tensions in Deuteronomy between oneness, loving God, fearing God, and the consequences of being lured away. Now, you can call it,
Obviously, there's always this great fear that the Israel will not believe in God, or they'll give him up, give God up. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here. So the belief is that, hey, they're really not going to follow God. So I really got to bring them in and threaten them.
but yes, but let's go back again. Who is the one speaking here?
That's Moses, and he's already had the experience of walking away to get the Ten Commandments, and they
So how much of what Moses is writing here is real from the perspective of God, and how much of it is real from the perspective of Moses? Or from the author?
Well, Moses said he was instructed by God to tell the.
That's what they always say. God told me to do it. Okay, but practically speaking, how much of this is Moses projecting his own anger and frustration for the fact that there have been times when you guys went astray, and as a result, I also lost my temper and went astray, and that's the reason I'm not going into the land. And so on some level, what we're being introduced here to are these multifaceted layers of relationship with God. One God that is apart from everybody else, that has love and listening connected to it, and what could feel like these threats or these fears that, could feel overwhelming or overpowering or even abusive for some, right? It's just speaking to your point of it, Audrey, there's some people who feel very uncomfortable referring to God as Avinu Malkeinu, right? Our Father, our King, because the language of patriarchy often brings with it feelings of oppression or abuse or other kinds of tropes that people feel uncomfortable with. These people don't want to view God in that way.
Can I say that in a different way?
Sure.
It could be a polemic against all the things that they did wrong in the north that caused them to flow in, and now you're part of us, and that was your fault, and this is what you did, and you know, you're unruly, and you know, you're what are they, stiff-necked, and you know, you never listened to us, and you always lorded over us, and look what happened to you as a result
Yes.
of it. And I think that's the sense that I get of this. It's kind of like an anger that they allowed this to happen, and they saw it coming because they wouldn't listen.
Yeah, you can make an argument that most of Deuteronomy, or a large part of Deuteronomy, is a polemic against the north.
A lecture.
Yeah, it's in response to. And what comes
Right.
with the response is also a theological wrestling with what it means to be in relationship with God. However, it's not a blame against God. It's a blame against the people.
So one thing you've taught us is repeats are important.
Yes.
And I've noticed that if you look at 6:4,
Mm-hmm.
all the words that I command you today shall be in your heart and
Yes.
in hearts and faith. And then you take a look at what you just showed us,
Yes,
Deuteronomy
you're right.
18.
Yes.
It's
It's
identical.
repeated in 13, it's repeated in 18.
Yeah.
But there's one major difference between the first version of the Shema, the first paragraph, and the second version. Does anyone know what it is? If you go back to chapter 6 and you compare the language of chapter 6 to the language of chapter 11, what's the major difference?
In chapter 11, Moses reminding Israel of what the Lord did for us in Egypt.
That's true. There are a few additions, but I'm actually talking about a linguistic difference.
11 looks like a contract. It's written in a more formal treaty format.
Yeah, so build on that.
Well, Deuteronomy was an ancient treaty form when you were a vassal nation, that when you were conquered, your conquering nation would force you to produce a treaty, and then they would use that treaty to enforce the rules upon their vassal.
Right?
So, because he says, love therefore the Lord your God, keep his charge, his laws, his rules, his commandments.
Right?
Is that what you're getting at?
No?
So
Also, they bring the whole majesty thing in, which is very unusual. Kings had barely been invented.
Linguistically, in chapter 11, it's an if statement. It's a condition.
Yeah, there's a conditional aspect to it. Again, I'm
But
thinking
in the
of something
first one, it
slightly
is
different.
just a commandment straight. Love.
Yeah,
And with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind.
that's true.
And here is an if you obey this.
Yes, there is that conditional piece. That's what Jerry was picking up on, which feels like the bribe and the threat piece.
Yeah.
Yep. The first paragraph of the Shema is in the singular, and the second paragraph of the Shema is in the plural.
Could you point out
No.
more specifically?
Yeah. Can you go back to chapter 6 for a second?
Oh, I see.
Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema, if I wanted to say that it was in the plural, meaning listen all of you, I would say Shim'u. Shema is in the singular.
Well, that's lost in the translation.
I know.
Yes.
In Hebrew, I'm going to continue. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha v'chol nafshecha v'chol modecha. And you shall love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your might. Now, you might say your is plural, but the verbiage and the language is in the second person singular.
How do we know? I mean, would the plural and the singular of Shema be written the same without vowels?
No.
No.
Take a look at verse 13 in chapter 11.
So, is what you're suggesting is that 6 is talking to the individual about his relationship with God, and that 11 is talking to the nation of Israel?
That's one of the theories.
That makes sense.
Okay, look at verse 13 on page 1052.
To Shema.
V'haya im shamoa tishme'u el mitzvotai. V'ava Adonai Elohechem ule'ogdo b'chol levavechem uvachol nafshechem. Those suffixes at the end of the words are talking about your hearts, your souls.
But it doesn't say that in the translation.
It doesn't, right? And the command about tefillin, if you look at the command about tefillin, it says, it says ukshartam leot al yadecha v'ayu letutafot beinenecha. You should bind them as a sign on your hand and between your eyes. But then it says in verse 18, al levavachem ve'al nafshechem ukshartem otam leot al yedchem v'hayu letutafot beinenechem. Right? Between your plural eyes, your plural hands.
Something to do good.
That's what it would seem to suggest. That the first instance of it is an individual form of relationship to God, and the second form is the communal relationship to God. As if to say, don't think that the relationship that you have with Adonai is singular only. It only applies to you. It applies to you, and it applies to all of you. Which is an interesting idea. Why the need to repeat it? You can make the argument that we got the point the first time, but the Torah doesn't tend to mince words.
Is it like in the other books where it's two different authors? I know we say that Deuteronomy is written by one person, but maybe it wasn't
Okay,
written by one
so
person.
I'm glad you brought that up. Let's look at Friedman.
DTR 1, DTR 2.
Okay, take a look
You already kind of provided an
at
explanation.
Deuteronomy chapter 6, page 320, and then look at 11. Are they the same author or are they different authors?
That's all the same, right?
It is all the same.
But maybe it's not.
But in a
Or maybe there's a different objective now, right? What might the objective be in doing it singularly and in the plural?
well, given what you were saying, it could be like the law code. You've got the law code about individual behavior, and then you've got the laws that cities have to keep, and it's just part of the law code. And
Right?
It's-
And remember also, Deuteronomy was written with the intention of it being like a second covenant. We're signing again. And in signing again, you're going to get a new code of the law, right? You'll get a new copy of everything you need to sign, all the fine print. And I want you to know that in signing this document, it doesn't just apply to you, but it applies to you. It applies to you, but it also applies to you.
So you're trying to have the community gel with the understanding that it's not only everybody's individual responsibility, but it's a communal responsibility.
That's right. Now, why is that important given the political backdrop?
So somebody else, you may not have violated the code, but somebody else may have, and you will still be punished.
Great. So if that's the case, give me another example in liturgy. I'll give you a hint. Around this time of year, where we have a similar code that appears in the plural, not just in the singular.
So it's a vidui.
The vidui, right? The ashamnu, the bagadnu, the gazalnu, the alchet shechatanu, the avinu, the malkenu. They're all in the plural. We atone for sins not just by the ones that we have committed, but the ones that we all commit. By the way, we apologize or seek forgiveness for them even if we haven't done them, on the off chance that somebody in our midst has done them. The covenant is not individual only. It is communal, it is plural, it is everybody. Go ahead.
So, the Decalogue that we just got through last week just precedes this. Is that in plural or singular?
Not in this. There's, I think, some references in both, but I don't know. I don't know that it's mirroring the Decalogue in Exodus.
Okay.
So the intention behind its reiteration is not to say that it's for you versus all of you. It's the law in its original form, with one variation, one major variation, which is the variation of the inclusion of the Exodus. Now,
Yeah,
if
but I mean, is the language plural or singular?
no, it's singular,
Singular.
right?
Because
So go back for a second and
well,
look.
it occurs to me, I mean, I was thinking about this, you just finished the Decalogue, all the 10 or maybe
Yeah.
whatever, how many commandments they included. And then, right away, he's kind of going in, Moses is going into another set of instructions, but they focus on, almost solely, on Lord is one.
Yes.
Okay, so if that, and it's first singular and then plural, so it's like he's emphasizing that. I mean, I've given you these 10, but, you know, the real important one is the first one.
And to emphasize
Yes.
that they redacted
Yes.
the first commandment.
But going...
Right, lest you think that in having one singular God, it only applies to you singular.
Right.
Yeah, that's a nice idea. I hadn't thought about it that way. I was also thinking about the idea that after the Decalogue in Exodus, there are 3 references to the phrase na'aseh. So, na'aseh, right? We will do. The first time it's just na'aseh. The second time it's just na'aseh. The third time it's na'aseh v'nishma. Right? Notice the shma part. But it's in the plural. We will do, we will hear, or we will understand. So, yeah, I wonder if there's something that they're playing off of. You might think that in hearing the laws in the singular, right, it's lo tachmod, you shall not covet singular. It's lo tirtzach, you shall not murder singular. It's kabed et avicha, you should honor singular. So I wonder if maybe the reason for the plurality of it is to help people recognize that it's not something that is singularly commanded.
Right. And I mean, the structure is such that after the Decalogue, he starts with the singular of the important Shema Yisrael. He starts with the singular, and then he goes to the plural.
Yes.
So it's like you kind of recap. You know, you teach it to him twice.
Yes.
And
Except
then,
there's a
let's-
difference.
Yeah, and then let's go on and reinforce it as the plural,
Right.
which
Yeah.
is important.
But let's talk about it practically for a second. Today, how do we use the Shema? Singularly or plurally? That's even a word. In the singular or in the plural?
Probably the plural.
Well, the name Adonai
Recite
makes that
it
very
together.
confusing.
Huh?
We recite it together.
We recite it together, however. Whose obligation is it?
Each person's.
It's each person's obligation to recite it twice a day, when you get up and when you lie down. So even though we say it communally as a part of the service, it's actually it's the obligation of the person individually to recite it every single day as a part of their affirmation of faith.
I think the fact that we're holding it seat is making it individual.
It's true, but here's the interesting thing about what liturgy did. Liturgy took 3 disparate paragraphs that are from 3 completely separate places of the Torah and put them together to create what we would call the 3 paragraphs of the Shema. The tzitzit, in actuality, had nothing to do with this command of God's observance, of God's oneness. Does anyone remember why we have the tzitzit?
Just to remind
Yeah, because
Remind us of what?
The Taryag.
Yeah, so yes, we've made it into a mnemonic to help us remember the 613 mitzvot.
Right.
I thought it's to not to be taken away from what your heart or your eyes tell you,
That's exactly right. But why?
because they can mislead you.
Why? Give me the example.
It's got to do with sex and women.
It does not have to do with sex and women.
That usually works for me.
Every other Torah story, you would have been right, but this one, no, it doesn't have to do with it. Okay, let's go back for a second. Go back to the book of Numbers. Go to page 840 with one hand, and in the other hand, go to page 855.
Page 40, you said? And
841 will do.
841 and
841 and 855. From a liturgical perspective, we extracted different texts in order to create different meanings, or to create new meanings. This is the story of the scouts. When God, or Moses, depending on which story you're reading, sends the scouts to go check out the land. Verse 17 says, Vayishlach otam Moshe latur et eretz Canaan. They want to go to scout the land, or look at the land, or item in verse 18, or item et haaretz mahi, and look at the land and see what it is. So then they go, and when they come back, it says, Verse 26. 843.
Just eat it.
843 first.
42?
Yeah. So they go and they come back. Vayelchu vayavohu el Moshe ve'el Aaron. They go and they come back to Moses and to Aaron, ve'el kol ha'adam b'nei Israel, to all of the people of Israel. El midbar Paran Kadesha. They go into the wilderness of Paran toward Kadesh. Vayashivu otam davar ve'et kol ha'edah vayarum et pri ha'etz. And they come back and they show from the same word to see what they had found, which was the fruit of the tree. And then it says, Efes ki, in verse 28, Efes ki az ha'am ha'yoshev ba'aretz ve'ha'arim v'tzurot gedolot me'od v'gam yelidei hanak ra'inu sham. However, the people who are there, they're powerful, their cities are fortified. Moreover, we saw, with our eyes, ra'ah, the Anakites there, the giants. So they go to scout the land, and they're supposed to see the land, and they come back and they tell us what they saw. Their eyes led them astray. Because as a result of the report, they don't have faith anymore that they can do it. Turn to page 854 at the bottom, 37. This is the third paragraph of the Shema. It comes at the end, the bookend of the story of the scouts. Vayomer Adonai Moshe lemor, and the Lord said to Moses, saying, Daber b'nei Yisrael v'marta lehem, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, Ve'asu lahem tzitzit, make for them fringes, al kanfei bigdeihem l'dorotam, on the corners of their garments for generations, ve'natnu al tzitzit hakanaf b'til dechelet, and put a thread of blue on those tzitzit. Ve'hayalachem l'tzitzit, and these tzitzit were item oto, you will look upon them. U'zachartem et kol mitzvot Adonai, and be reminded of all the mitzvot, v'asitem otam, and to do them, ve'lo taturu acharei levavchem v'acharei einechem asher atem zonim achareihem. You will not let your eyes lead you astray. It's the same word as latur, to scout the land. After your heart and after your eyes, this is where Phil was going to make his comment.
Yeah.
Asher atem zonim achareihem, that you have lustful urges. Zonim, zonah is whoring oneself, if you will. So that you will surely remember all of the mitzvot and you will become sacred or holy. Why do we have tzitzit? They are the physical reminder to not let our eyes let us go astray the way that they let us go astray when we went to scout out the land. Mm-hmm. The language is identical. This is a midah keneged midah moment, right? A measure for measure. In the same way that I told you to use your eyes to scout out the land and come back, they led you astray. Here's your physical reminder to never go astray with your eyes, or to lust after, or to whore oneself out, or whatever words you want to use to translate. So, what did they do? In building the Shema, they took the singular, this is for you. They took the plural, this is for you, and we're going to give you a reminder to say, and putting it all together, here's a good way to remind you not to do those terrible things, and always remember that there's one God that commands you and all of you. Put it all together, there's your Shema. But they took it from three totally different places. All of which have three totally different kind of theological underpinnings. But for us, they're the Shema. Yeah. Right? And Jerry's right? It's the tzitzit become this reminder of, what did you say it was before?
Well, I was saying that it makes it a singular thing because it's a...
Right. So the tzitzit that each person is wearing also becomes a singular reminder for the individual. And you said, Gary, that it was one of those things that reminds us collectively of the Taryag mitzvot, of the 613 mitzvot. It's this beautiful play of the individual and of the plural. And there together we have our liturgy that is all rooted in these three different stories that are all coming from three different vantage points. So it works really cool. It's really cool in the way it all comes together, but how it was pieced together are coming from three different theologies, if you will. Okay, yeah.
Now that's a religious explanation, which it's all by. But
yeah.
there's another one though, which is you could look at this as a formation of government, where the individual members of this society have to follow the rules and they have to hold their civil authorities to those rules. And then the civil authorities have a set of rules and they mutually have to keep each other honest.
Right.
So if the people stray, then the civil authorities will get them back on the path. And if the civil authorities stray, then the peoples will keep them So it seems a little bit like a political system they're setting up. And what I'm really getting to here is a phrase that I think has really been damaged a lot, is the kingdom of God. I think.
Yeah, although not necessarily in the text.
But if what I'd like to kind of point you to is that you know, the doorpost and the signpost and all of that whole structure is about that. I think is that you can't have this society unless everybody's on board with the rule set,
Right.
and that's the kingdom. The reason I bring it up is because the name Yahweh stopped being uttered when the Hellenists took over, and they no longer were in charge, so they felt they couldn't
Right.
protect the name.
Right.
But that's it.
However, I just would add that the spiritual, theological, religious piece of this, and it's being put together as a prayer, is happening several generations later,
Yes.
after what we would say is the canonization of Deuteronomy, or the codification of Deuteronomy. Right, we're talking about something that's happening probably toward the end of the Second Temple period, or the dawn of the Rabbinic period, and doesn't even become formalized in liturgy until probably the 7th or 8th century of the Common Era.
Because there's really not prayer here as we understand it today.
No, the prayer gets pieced together much later. These are really three separate and disparate stories that have different authorship with different context and different, you know, kind of historical backdrop than the way that we now use it today. Which I think is, to both of your points, in terms of its power. But in terms of looking at its authorship, it's a slightly different, you know, motif.